Hi everybody, how are you all doing? It's been a minute since I've made a video here, but life gets in the way. I'm just gonna apologize in advance. I have a cold or a cough or something. I'm just not feeling too well, so if I assault your ears with a coughing fit, I thoroughly apologize. Alright, so we're just gonna jump right in here. We're gonna talk about words. Why we're talking about words is because excuse me, is because of recent events involving a very, very famous YouTuber and his use of words that, a lot of people don't think was a very smart choice of words, but whatever. Anyway, so as far as my take on words, one, just like it's only awkward if you make it awkward, it's only offensive if you want it to be offensive. When you hear a word, it's really up to you whether or not you want to be offended by it. So my first point as to why it's not a big deal is because language evolves. An example of language evolving would be the use of the word groovy. The modern definition is awesome or nice. And I suppose you could say it's also aesthetic sounding, but we'll get to that. The analogy of the word groovy and why it means what it means is referring to the groove in a vinyl record. Most people used to say that musicians are so together that it's like they're the needle guided by the groove. Language is always evolving, meaning saying it constantly only has one connotation and definition specific to that time period makes you seem kind of closed-minded and a non-critical thinker. If we only took the word groovy in reference to the time period that it was invented in, it wouldn't really make for much use today. Yes, you could describe music as groovy, but now people use the word groovy in all kinds of scenarios. Now, you can acknowledge the historic connotations of a word, but bringing up all of the connotations from the past the second you hear the word doesn't exactly make sense to me. I mean, you could talk about the history of a word in order to educate people, but as far as using the word itself, it doesn't make sense. For example, ContraPoints here has stated on Twitter that the N-word is not just a word. It's a word associated with an extreme history of slavery, murder, discrimination, and hate. First of all, I kind of hate that they say that the N-word is not just a word. It is just a word. Like, it's a word like anything else. Like pineapple. Now, no one in the world is trying to erase the history of the word. I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand. By not saying that you're offended by it, it doesn't mean that you're erasing the complete history of why it became a word in the first place or what it used to mean. We're not trying to erase it, we're just trying to move past it. PewDiePie said something kind of regrettable on a live stream. I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. If you don't, I feel like every other person in the world has made a video about it, but this specifically isn't really about him and what he said. My analysis is just of words in general. Anyway, context is everything. So saying PewDiePie is a racist for using a word that historically was used as an insult and piling on all other contexts, except for the one he used it in, almost makes a person seem childish. To me, it means that these people are unable to adapt to situations in which words are used in a different manner than they have ever thought they could be used in. If you only limit yourself to one definition of a word, you'll always think of it in that way, which means that you're unable to accurately analyze a situation and think about context. Like I said, context is everything. My second point here is that, like language, politics and society evolve. An example of politics evolving is how Democrats during Lincoln's time were the conservatives, while Republicans were considered to have liberal values. Democrats were actually the ones who issued literacy tests to see if black people were smart enough to vote. Does anyone associate that with the position that Barack Obama ran under? Now, think about it. Why don't they? Maybe because you move forward with time. Most liberals like to say that they're Democrats and they support Obama. They don't ever associate the party with the things that they've done in the past. If we're talking about society, not too long ago, it was okay that women couldn't vote. But guess what? We've left that behind because we've replaced it with more modern ideals that conform to the way that we all think. So if you don't think about the present in terms of ever changing, then I'm sorry, but you should start thinking that way. Otherwise, how could you possibly accurately analyze what's going on around you without realizing that it'll change in the next few years? There's nothing that's always right or always certain or will always be the truth. Just because you disagree with something that happened in the past doesn't make it any less real or any less accurate. Just because you don't agree with the fact that women weren't allowed to vote in the past doesn't make that part of reality any less true. You can't deny the fact that it happened. And for everyone during that time, that's what they thought was right. So you can't place your own modern standards on things. My third point, and I'm really, really passionate about this one, no one can make you feel offended unless you let them. When you become offended by things other people say, you let them win. And think about it like this. Do they even deserve to win? No. And I know this is a really weird and kind of old analogy, but you know why bullies bully people, or why your siblings bullied you, or why trolling even exists? It's because people want to get a rise out of you. If you let it get to you, you let them win. By the way, here's sort of a tangent. If you're telling someone that, let's say, the N-word is racist and, I don't know, they're black and they say that they personally don't care if it's used, and you call them an Uncle Tom, it's not the name Uncle Tom that offends me. It's the fact that you're a piece of shit hypocrite. So don't do that. Your argument is completely invalid, and you look like a moron. Oh, and don't be surprised if people dig up every instance of you using a slur and throw it back at you without context, because that's what happens when you're a hypocrite. So here's just another quick tangent about PewDiePie. I personally don't think that it was the smart thing to do for him to say the word. I mean, you're the most popular YouTuber in history. I think that you should choose your words way more carefully when you're that famous. And I understand, you always have the right to say what you want, but I'm of the belief that when you're making an argument or when you have the power to influence millions of people, you need to choose your words wisely, because not everybody is swayed by your own candid way of speaking. So I feel like, and I've seen on Twitter that a lot of people maybe agree with this, but I'm totally for him saying whatever he wants to say. That's, anyone can say what they want to say. And you know what? He was playing a game, and like it was said, it was in the heat of the moment. We all get that way. I just think that you are no longer a regular person when you have 50 million people plus viewing your videos and aware of who you are. I think that's kind of a status in which you are no longer held to normal people's standards. You have to hold yourself to higher standards, because if you don't, you'll easily lose your influence to people who are too dumb to realize that it's really not that big a deal that you said this dumb word while you were playing a video game. That's my argument, is that you have to remember who it is that you're talking to. If they are unable to grasp the idea that anybody should be able to say what they want to say, and that the context that you use the word in wasn't anything insulting, I just think that it's important to be careful of what you say, because not your entire audience base will understand what you mean. Number 4, and this kind of ties in to number 3, words only hold as much power as you give them. You can acknowledge the history and power of a word, but bringing up the entirety of its past every time you hear the word isn't progressive to me. In fact, you're just keeping the insulting past alive instead of letting the word evolve and change like it should. You're giving it more power by bringing up all of the terms that could be associated with it from the past. Like I said, language evolves for the 15th time. And if it really was that insulting and people couldn't get past it, why would black people use the word now? Literally no one uses what I'm going to call the G word because I don't want my video to get flagged. The word died, and I think the only people using the word in a negative context are probably war vets who may suffer from other problems other than just the fact that they're old and are unable to adapt to the modern world. In fact, I don't think most people who hate the N-word even know the G word. There's a ton of slurs you could call people, but by telling everybody the entire history of it and making sure that everybody knows it's associated with those ideas, you're just keeping the racism alive. Instead of just letting it go and acknowledging its past, but also letting the word evolve. In fact, by continuing to put forth those definitions associated with the word, you're just setting in stone that it's a bad word that no one can use and that it can't evolve because you've just anchored it to its past. On a side note, in Korean, guk is the suffix meaning country. Hanguk means Korea, Miguk means the USA. So, to me, it's like one of the stupidest slurs anyone can use. Okay, so final thoughts. For the 20th time, language evolves. And usually in the context of the N-word, it's leftist white people not only saying that it's a bad word, but also calling people Uncle Tom. If you really care so much about it, why don't you let black people decide how offensive it is and how much it offends them, rather than other people fighting for them as if they can't fight for themselves? I'm not entirely sure why, if you're so progressive and so for other races, you won't just let them fight their own battles. You're the only person who keeps telling everybody else what to think about this one word and not to say it. And that drives me insane because no one needs anybody else fighting for them without asking. Anyway, also, Omni Disney is a moron and a hypocrite and is way more toxic than anyone using the N-word seriously. Seriously. Thanks for watching. I'm sorry you had to sit through me being sick. Hope you all have a lovely week. I will see you later. Oh, and I'm sorry for the monotony. It's weird and gross, and I hate it. And I want to feel better. Okay, bye.